I'm here with Lisa Broderick, and we're talking about her new book, All the Time in the World. Welcome, Lisa.
Laura, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. And in the book, you're talking about a big subject, and that subject is time. And so I'm just going to start with the big question. What is time?
That actually inspires the lyrics to a song, and I know you're a musician, and that is, does anybody really know what time it is? No, and here's why.
Yeah.
The nature of time remains the biggest mystery in humanity, right alongside what God is, what creation is, and what is life. Mm-hmm. But in some sense, time is a linear construct created on this plane of existence for us to grow and cope and navigate. But beyond that, even Einstein said, time is an illusion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit before we started about the impact of COVID, this pandemic that we've been in, on time and people's experience of time. And I'd love to hear your take on that and what's been going on for you.
Well, I think of it as a way to get the most out of this book as an offering. This book is an offering to the world. So before COVID, picture your day, right? And imagine there's a number of minutes in the day, and each minute is $100. Imagine how we were all, wow, we're not just going to waste hundreds of dollars because we were so focused on our schedules. Now, during and after COVID, it's different. And while not universal, it's pretty pervasive. People are stressed out, burned out, overwhelmed, and hopeless. Why? I believe it's because so many of us believe we will run out of time to do the things we want and need to do. Mm-hmm. This is inspiring a state of panic, of fight or flight. And how do we get out of this state? Because clearly that is not a productive state. It's very deleterious to health and to our mental state and our emotional state. And so the book explains how time works so that people with clinical feelings and a desire to be rooted in science can appreciate and understand that. But it has exercise to practice what the antidote to feeling hopeless and overwhelmed is. Because if you can take back your feeling of hopelessness around time so that you control time, so that you know you will have enough time, that overwhelmed, hopeless, burned out sense magically disappears. So the book is energetic and uplifting in that way, in that it counters the effect of those pervasive feelings that we're feeling today in society.
And you started the book before the pandemic. And what was your impetus then? And how has it changed, or has it changed?
Well, that goes back to a very long story. I grew up as the child of New Yorkers who moved to Arizona. Mm-hmm. And in Phoenix, Arizona, in the 60s, we had a house in the mountains, a cabin far away in the north. And at the age of 4, I was jumping on a bed, as little girls would, with my sister, and the bed rolled away, and I flew through the air and was impaled on a plate glass window. Mm. And this is a remote part of Arizona. This was many decades ago. We were miles and miles, if not more, from any facility, which was not a hospital. And my mother was told at the scene, I don't think she's going to make it. So I did make it. And I had what many would consider a classic experience related to death. I remember that. I remember the window, the flying through the air, the car ride, which was a station wagon, the place where I went, which was not a facility. It was a hospital facility. It was a doctor's office, all of that. And then suddenly I came back and I was back in my body and a little girl full of life. With that said, my relationship to the world had changed. And a lot of people report this after these experiences. Everything was alive, the animals and the plants. And of course, in the mind of a 4-year-old, that might be true, but it seemed even more vivid for me. And out of that, if there's a superpower, I seem to have acquired a superpower. And that was a knowledge and appreciation of the malleability of time. Where later on, when I would run track and I would jump over things, I could do that in slow motion. I could slow down the field. Now, today, we often hear athletes report of this. In fact, it's widely used and it's taught. Mm-hmm. Slowing down the field, getting in the zone, using imagery and all these other things. I was doing this beyond the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, where I would have innumerable experiences of the zone. One of them was hilarious. I was 8 years old and we were bowling in a bowling league in Phoenix. I was terrible. I was with my older brother. And for some reason, every bowl was a strike. It was so exasperating that I couldn't really handle it emotionally. And I began to try to mess up. I began to try to throw the ball somewhere else, to put it in a different lane. It was all in slow motion. It was clearly a highly, highly advanced experience of the zone, and I was unable to. So I bowled nearly a perfect game at the age of 8 in this state. And then I thought to myself, even as an 8-year-old, there's something to all of this. And while I couldn't study it at the time, when I did get a little bit older and the Tao of Physics was published, right, in the 70s, I began to read about this. And I had the benefit of so many giants in consciousness begin to write about this, Shakti Gawain and visualization and imagery and the nature of physics related to consciousness. And it never left me. So that when I became a meditator in my 20s, I noticed more of these instances. And then by my 30s, I started to study ancient mysticism, ancient religions, ancient practices related to time, but also consciousness. And then quantum physics, because clearly quantum mechanics, the realm where so many mysterious things happen that we know are there, but can't explain or control yet, was part of the mix.
Okay, I have a lot of questions coming out of that. It's fascinating. First, did you maintain, it sounds like you maintain that sense of the malleability of time ongoing. It didn't leave you.
I did. And with practice, it got better.
Yeah.
And then I ran into other people who were thinking about time. In the 70s, there was a biomechanical engineer by the name of Itzhak Benthoff. Today, he would probably be a giant in physics. He died in 1979 in a plane crash of a DC-10, leaving from Chicago. With that said, he wrote a lot about time and quantum physics before he died. And I began to understand that there was something there to study. And he had practices going as far back as the 70s where people could practice slowing down time. And I practiced them and they worked. It was amazing.
And these are some of the exercises or practices that you offer in the book.
Some are, yes. So the actual slowing down of clock time, a very interesting practice. I've done this with a group of as large as 8 people, each with a clock or watch face in front of them with a second hand. And people have asked me, wow, everything is digital. Can you do that without it? And the answer is no, not really. And here's why. Time exists because things move around. No movement, no time. Think about it. Nothing moves, no matter moves. Does time pass? Matter is inherently related to gravity and matter. So a second hand is an external display of movement where we can combine what I call focused perception with the physical reality of the second hand moving to actually help in our minds. And if it's in our minds and we're watching it and 8 people are having the same experience, maybe something's going on here. The second hand, stop moving. As part of a meditation. It is pretty remarkable and paradigm changing for people.
Yes, yes. And I want to say about the book, All the Time in the World, that there are many, you offer many practices and many exercises for people. And you talk about this focused perception, which we'll talk more about. And so it's just quite helpful in that way. The book just has so much to offer in that way. So people will really be getting a lot out of, be getting a lot of opportunities to practice and to learn and to gain insight on their own experience with time.
Well, Laura, do we have a moment for a quick exercise?
Sure.
How fun would that be? Now, I need to say, because I also work in public safety, do not do this while driving. Right. Everybody, do not. This is something to be done. If you need to pull over, right, we're going to be comfortable. Do not attempt this while driving. And so the quick exercise will be how we can apply a newfound knowledge of how time works, both from a scientific sense and a spiritual and brain sense, to our own lives, to lead better lives, to lead lives of unlimited potential. So, and I won't tell you what this is about first, but it's a bit of a manifestation exercise. And the reason is manifestation and time are intimately related, right? Things show up in time in your life. And so, and how they show up and when they show up is all part of the exercise. So everyone sit comfortably and close your eyes, right? And I'll talk a little bit about, and in fact, you mentioned hypnosis and other types of ways of going inward. Well, hypnosis is focused perception, focused attention. I use the term focused perception. And so this is a state we're going to go into where we're choosing to focus on one thing moment to moment and setting aside everything else. And so feeling relaxed and closing your eyes, it's easier to focus on these things, on visions, for example, on things that you would like to have in your life that you might see in your mind's eye. And so I'll suggest this practice. Everyone sit comfortably and slowly close your eyes. I have found, and I've actually been at brain study institutes, where it is valuable to have both feet on the ground and sitting straight up in a chair with a back and your hands on your thighs like King Tut. Now, that's an energy pattern, which is often used in China. With that said, the lotus position is a different energy pattern from India and very valid as well, and very powerful also. So either way, with that said, you want to be comfortable. And you're sitting comfortably, and now slowly close your eyes. We're going to begin with focusing on our breath, which again is a common way to go inward. We're going to do something special, though, related to how brain chemistry works. Inhale through our nose, a regular inhalation, and let's exhale through our mouth with your exhaled breath twice as long as your inhale. We're breathing in through our nose and breathing out through your mouth. In this way, we are triggering the parasympathetic nervous system to relax, the opposite of fight or flight. With our next inhale, see the number 3 appear in front of your mind's eye. And we're going to count down. And with your next inhale and exhale, see that number 3 dissolve into the number 2. And with the next inhale and exhale, see the number 2 dissolve into the number 1. And with the next inhale and exhale, see the number 1 dissolve into the number 0. This, as a teacher of mine called it, the time of no time. Now we are in that focused attention, that focused perception. And we can easily bring to mind something that you would like to create for yourself, something satisfying and fulfilling, as though it's a movie playing out. And the sensory nature of it is so absorbing in your mind. It absorbs you, the sights and the smells and the sounds, all of it. Now keep this in mind, and I often do this, especially as a practice. I think of all the ways it will benefit others. Rather than just benefiting myself, think that it is a detriment to no one and a benefit to all, whatever this thing you would like. And sometimes I'm asked why, and the answer is a practical answer, and that is, if I'm wishing and wanting something for others, I won't be afraid it won't happen for me. It's simply a way to expand our perception to the greater world around us and not be afraid of anything. Now, keeping this thought in mind, and we're living it, we're experiencing it, now become aware that it's already happened. Stop. It's happened. It's accomplished fully and completely. There is nothing more to do. Hold that thought. Experience it. The relief, the joy, all of the sensations that you feel with this thing that you desired is done. Nothing more to do. Don't ponder the details. Just live the experience of it, that it's done, it's happened, it's complete. Now, taking our bodies into account and the world around us, imagine amplifying this feeling of certainty right out the bottom of your feet into the earth below, absorbing the whole earth as though the entire earth were made of this feeling of certainty, completion, it's done. And moving upwards, out from the top of your head and your body from every direction, out, further, 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 as though you were going into the galaxy and into the universe as far as you can go. And now, just let the feelings go. Relax. Feel your body resting in the calmness of nothing more to do. And when you're ready, we can slowly open our eyes. Now, here's a little secret about that exercise. On the fields, so many fields of science where we know that things happen and we don't know how they happen, we do know that the way we show up for a situation affects physical reality. That is a basic tenet of quantum mechanics, number one. Number two, experientially, if we were to be horribly angry or sad and walk into a room of neutral people, they would all know how we felt. So the real question is, does how we show up in our minds impact physical reality? And if so, how? And if so, what's our part in it? What this exercise begins to show us is when we are showing up now for this situation that we want to have happen, we are going to show up differently. How? With the certainty that it's already done. And while this is an exercise in manifestation and things we want in our life, it's truly an exercise of time. Because in some sense, everything that we want to have happened simply hasn't happened yet. And we can begin to be part of that, both on what we would call the quantum field and in the field of our own lives and our own minds for how we show up for situations by using practices like these.
Very helpful meditation. I think it really, I see what you mean. It gives people, you have facility within your experience and time. So that's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
There's a much longer, this was a very sort of abbreviated version. There's a much longer version on my website, which will be available for anyone to download. And a little secret, a big reveal, I do this from 3 to 5 a.m. every morning with aspects of my life. I remember, I make notes of things during the day and I live them as experiences, both, mundane, will so-and-so call, will a check come, and really big. I work in public safety and policing and social justice. I have a dream that our communities can reconcile with the police and we can all live as one in a way that's in harmony. I live that dream using meditations like these, and I'm hoping my work in that area will someday bear that fruit.
Oh, I want to talk about that too. And, it reminds me, when you say that you're practicing this meditation in your own life, and for the benefit of all people, for the benefit of the planet and of the communities, and that you're doing that from 3 to 5 each day. And I have a similar practice, but what you're doing, it reminds me of what many of the monks, and different traditions are doing in their sitting in the caves and going to.
Well, in fact, that time of day, 3 a.m. is quite in India. There's this very particular time of day of manifestation, which is 3 a.m. local time. Yeah. In Kabbalah, which I've studied as well, it's around 5 a.m., the time of the prophets. It's a magical time. And I would say I'm clinically minded. I was trained as an economist, and then I got into these other things. So I wanted to know why things happen. I believe that if we can give a suggestion to our higher selves without any interference from our lower self, our personality, our fears, at a time when we're very programmable and then just fall asleep, we let our higher selves do all the work for us. And then we wake up and live our lives and don't think another thought about it except to laugh when it happens, which is so fun.
That's great. That's great. I imagine you have a very rich dream life.
Yes, I did study with a Kabbalist who was a dream, Dr. Jerry Epstein in New York City, who was a dream teacher in the Western tradition. And it was quite a remarkable experience. Yeah.
Well, one of the things before we get to police to peace or peace to police?
Police to peace, yes.
Police to peace. I want to talk about that before we finish. But I want to also talk about, what we're pointing to. So we're in ordinary reality, right? Our everyday reality, where all of our 5 senses are focused. And when you talk about focused perception and, what we just did in that exercise, we're moving into an expanded consciousness. Would you say that's accurate? Expanding beyond our including our 5 senses, but also into this larger field of consciousness and awareness.
Yes. And I talk about that in the book. What is that larger field? And so again, we're so steeped in science, which has tremendous value, but scientists will say in science, it's only real if it can be measured.
That's right.
Wow. And so then what about consciousness?
Right.
That is the hard problem. Do our brains emanate consciousness? What happens? What is life? Is the brain alive? Is it generating thoughts or receiving thoughts? And so I think of it as this: considering the amazing complexity of the universe and the existence of matter and energy and time in multiple dimensions, our existence goes way beyond Newton and Galileo and physical reality.
Yeah.
And it's part of a reality way beyond what we can see, which to me suggests the quantum realm.
Yes.
Which in everyday life is beyond what we understand as reality, but someday soon will not be. It will be something we experience and are able to be part of in our everyday lives.
Yes, yes, it's the experiential. I'll say a good friend of mine is a monk, and he's also a neuroscientist fellow at Stanford. And he said, well, Western science is fantastic, and he's quite educated in it. He said, but one of the thing that's missing is that your experience doesn't count.
Because it can't be measured.
Yeah, he said in Buddhist science, or Vedic science, actually the experience, you had the experience, so it does count as evidence.
Well, and I wouldn't want to go awry of Western science. I think they will learn that your experience does count. Think about this. So the basic laws of thermodynamics, the first law of thermodynamics, and conservation of energy, nothing is lost. Energy is simply transformed. Isn't your experience energy? Yeah. Where does that go?
Right.
I think it goes right back in, and it does count.
Yes, exactly. And I agree. And I think he would agree. It's catching up. There are these marvelous things about it. And for me, physics is that intersection with the spiritual, with this place of consciousness. And so it excites me a lot. I'm not as well versed in it as I think you are, but it's a very exciting field, and it points to so many possibilities, as it were.
Well, unlike today, where so many physicists are not part of the consciousness work, the early quantum physicists were. Schrodinger, these physicists, they were questioning and in fact, famous quotes are, everything begins with consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental. Right. The spiritual, because they were watching the original double slit experiments, where how they showed up, how they observed actually affected physical reality, and they were blown away. They couldn't turn away from consciousness.
That's right. David Bohm.
Bohm.
Wonderful. So it's right there. It's the mystical aspect of science.
And many of them turn to the East for their mysticism, for their answers.
Sure.
Although, of course, the mystical nature, David Bohm, of course, right? Yes. The mystical nature of science is not lost on many. I believe that it needs, there's a greater acceptance. What this book tries to do is it melds both. It starts with the science. It is rigorous science. It's the latest science. And then it asks the question, does how we show up affect our physical reality in the larger world beyond the quantum? I will say in quantum science itself, increasingly every day, a new research study reveals that the quantum world is at work in our everyday bigger life. They have shown entanglement to be physically in this plane of existence, our big world of universes and planets existing just as it does in the mathematical modeling of the quantum. And one day they will be one world.
Yes, I am looking forward to that. I think that's exciting. And entanglement theory, just for a moment while we're on it, that's the cat's meow.
That's the real mystery, right? So let's see science. It's moving faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
No one can explain that.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So you were talking about, the work that you're doing, and it's such important work. And I'd love to hear more about Police to Peace, this nonprofit that you started.
Well, I appreciate that. And people often say, what, you wrote a book about time. Why is that important? And I thought to myself, people want to know what it is theirs to do now. Mm-hmm. If you didn't care what you needed to do now, you wouldn't care what time it was. So it's integrally, woven into our lives in ways like that. With that said, you also get down to the question of meaning, fulfillment, asking the question, what is it that's mine to do now? Mm. And so I worked with small businesses for many decades out of Silicon Valley and high technology. And when I got to my 50s, I started to change a little bit. And in fact, I see that there's a picture of the Dalai Lama very close to you. And that is, he was paraphrased as saying in 2014, the world will be changed by women who are turning inward and using their skills to transform things. And what I decided to do was I no longer wanted to work on things which were not socially accretive, which did not benefit the greater, which could be a detriment to none and a benefit to all. And I was wondering about that, and I was writing the book at the same time. So I was inherently making space for the question, what is it that's mine to do now? And I will say I had a vision. I was working in Florida, and I was on a beach on June 30th, 5 years ago or so. And I had a vision. A police vehicle came on the beach, and I saw words on the police vehicle appear as the words peace officer, which were not physically written on the side, but were startling to me. Now, I knew that a vision like this could be turned away from, and I could ignore it and pick myself up and go on like nothing happened. Or I could ask myself, what is it that's mine to do now? Or another famous question, if not me, who? If not now, when? So I made a phone call and I started to research. And I realized that I had a background in high technology. The idea of introducing the word peace into policing in the country could actually be a disruptive technology for change, for healing. 5 years later, we're doing this work around the country. And guess what? Peace officer on vehicles and in communities and uniforms. And as a friend of mine said, who's an officer, branding an attitude of peace has become a powerful transformation for the country. Also, I do note, just from a practical standpoint, the legal name of police officers in most states is peace officer.
Yeah.
Let's return to that. It seems pretty easy. Yeah. And then also, as an economist, I decided to study the impact. What is the impact of introducing the word peace officer into a community? Well, community members feel safer. They feel more connected. They feel like people can change. Police officers feel that they are more than enforcing the law. They're guardians of the peace, guardians of the community. And Laura, if we can get to that, then we can overcome some really, really serious challenges that we have in this country.
Oh, that may it be so. I will.
That's what I'm manifesting at 3 a.m.
Well, I'm going to hold that in my meditation as well. And how are you doing that? Just some. I know you said you're working in different communities, and how do you implement some of this? What does that look like?
Well, we have a national nonprofit, Police to Peace, police the number word, police the number 2, the number 2, and the word peace, police2peace.org. Yeah. And we work with communities around the country, sometimes communities fraught by violence.
Yeah.
Recently, 2 communities reached out to us, Portland, Oregon, and a community in North Carolina, which had a tragic shooting. And as a result of these, harm, the fear of harm, how people feel, how they relate to one another is so great that there seemed to be almost no way to come together, except that by bringing in people who are specially trained in mediation, in moderation, in peacekeeping, in peace-building practices, as our organization is, and sitting with both sides and having discussions about values, about what matters to us as people, about saying, I'm sorry if it's needed to be said, sitting down with those who have felt harm, who perceive harm, even if some might not be there. It doesn't matter. And so that is the beginning of healing of a community. It takes time, it takes commitment, but we're in both hands and both feet working around the country. Yeah. And then we introduce the idea of peace officer to the sheriff's department, to the police department, to become part of their practice, their ethos, their way of being in terms of showing up for their community. Because does how we show up in our minds in a situation affect reality? Well, if we're showing up as peace officers, we may just have a different outcome, a wonderful outcome.
Really true. It's so true. So thank you so much for doing that work in the world.
Thank you for asking.
And it's I think I read in the book, it's timely, but or in something I was reading about you, it's so timely, and
well, that's back to the work in this book and the work anyone can do. Yeah. If we clear our minds and we give ourselves the space to ask the question, what is it that's mine to do now? Which is what this book is about. This book is about time.
Yeah.
Right. And we ask that question and we wait for the answer. It will come. And this came to me as something that could be done and should be done.
Yeah.
Just because it's a really difficult problem doesn't mean we should turn away. And I was able to ask and answer the question because I had done this work.
That's so great. Thank you. And so what's next for you?
Well, continuing to work with Police to Peace around the country. And back to the exercise, and we talked about people are stressed out, burned out, feeling harm. And all of that trauma is related to time. Time happened in the past, trauma happens in the past. Unless the trauma is happening right now, in which case it's not a trauma, it would be a violence, right? Yeah. And then there's fear of it, which is projected into the future. I'm hoping to help people heal by taking on a newfound knowledge of time, by applying that to our daily lives. There's a version of this exercise in the book, which you're taken through this, but it's not something that you focus on that you want to have happen. It's something you're afraid will happen or did happen. So instead of suddenly realizing in your mind that it's already happened, you reverse it. It's a very powerful way to reverse trauma or fear of trauma. Let's say you're terrified you won't get the job and you're waiting for the phone call. And of course, how you're showing up in every moment to your children and your family and picking up the phone when it rings is going to inform your reality in some sense. Just as we said, people walking into a room who feel very sad or very angry. You can change that by reversing that, doing this practice so that how you show up can actually influence reality. And there's the big question mark, and that is, how does that relate to the quantum field, to quantum mechanics? We do not yet know, but I believe it relates very, very closely, if not the same as, I would venture to say. So you're actually working on that realm, reversing this negativity, showing up in this positive way in your mind, and in some sense, and we'll know in the future, we don't know now, really informing what does happen.
I'm going to throw this out there. If we talk about the quantum field, this idea that time is a construct and that of material, of matter.
Yes.
And that in some ways, everything is actually happening without time all at once.
Well, now we're getting into, so now people really, there's really, really something to talk about. Here are the big questions in time. Do we live in a block universe?
Right.
That's the question. Where everything exists all at once, as though you are above looking down at blocks, and every block is a moment of time and they all exist at once, and you can experience one block or another. Another thing is there a chronology protection conjecture, which means that if you were able to travel back in time, could you kill your own parents? Terrible example. And would you be here?
Right.
Or does time branch with every passing moment? So there are an infinite number of timelines, or is there only one single timeline? The question is, these are all valid theories for time. Absolutely. We do not know. Ancient mysticisms and teachers focus on the now being the only reality. And I would agree with that. So I am a block universe person. Interesting. And that is, and actually it's Carlo Rovelli, which is loop quantum theory, which I cover in the book. It sounds technical. It is, but it is where time truly exists. It's this construct we have, a linear construct for this plane of reality that we as humans have, that we can change with our minds, number one. And number two is not truly what it appears because we've constructed it. Truly, everything is happening all at once.
Right. Which is, and you go into this in the book, which is that that's the basis of how you would be able to access and in your words, reverse trauma.
That's right. Well, and that is supported in quantum theory. It's called the quantum eraser experiment, where using the double slit, they actually, if people are familiar with that, you're observing phenomenon, photons going through slits. What if you observe them later and thought about them at the time? Guess what? They change based on what you did now, even though it already happened. How's that possible? That's just changed the past.
I love that. That's a brilliant example of double slit theory's relevance to healing the psyche. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes. So even if in some sense, if it's only a coping mechanism for now, because we're so primitive in our understanding of how things really work,
Yeah.
I have a philosophy, of course, with Police to Peace, and that is do no harm.
Yeah.
We're certainly doing no harm. And may it do more than that in terms of really helping, being a detriment to no one and a benefit to all? Yes, it's supported.
Beautiful. Anything else you'd like to share? Any thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I did want to share the complexity of the universe and for us to appreciate we're in this moment in time. And honestly, the time puns are infinite, which is another time pun. And we go on and on.
Yeah.
But there's always a chance to learn something new about the universe, even with all of the consternation and the difficulty we're going through, and discover more previously unknown possibilities, including things like other dimensions and time travel and manipulating time. And we can apply those to our own lives to lead our best possible lives. And that's really what it's all about. In some sense, and I use this in the book, we're each in a movie starring us. And in that movie starring us, we're the producer and the director, and our life is the film, and time is moving by. But you could hold an old style film in a canister in your hand, and it would encompass your life over time. So if that's true, looking up on the screen, and I'm always Julia Roberts. And so Julia, I'm looking up at my screen and I'm like, no, Julia, don't do that. or cheering or rooting on. It's a wonderful exercise for us to gain perspective about our own fears. And we can use that to, again, lead lives of infinite possibilities on an unlimited nature. We're limiting ourselves, and we don't need to. And we can use this newfound knowledge of time to do that.
Yes. And the exercises in the book will help with that. And, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you another big question. So in our talk of the infinite potential and possibility of the universe and the complexity of the universe, what are your thoughts on death and your near-death experience?
Oh, yes. And so we'll back to the first law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy, right? So something dies and it's no longer here. Wait a minute. Number one. Number two, I did actually experience what are very classic experiences of near death or a death experience. And I treat this in the book, and that is there are quantum biologists right now who are looking into the quantum nature of the universe and the biology of the body and where they intersect, as though in some sense there is conservation of energy. We don't go anywhere. And I do tell a story just in closing, and that is my mother died about 4 years ago, and she was very clinically minded. She was an economist by training. And I said to her, Mom, I think that you may not go anywhere when you die. And we knew she was going to die. She had cancer. And she was not very open to that idea. And I said, you know what? Just think about it. I think electricity might be the easiest thing to manipulate. So we'll be here with you. And if you are there, and if you remember, and if you want to do something, give us a show. And by the way, my brother, who's a medical doctor, he really needed to see a show because he would then see evidence that there was something beyond a body which had died. Right. So my mother died in her own home, and we were all around her very late in the morning, the time of the prophets, right? Between 2 and 5 a.m. And I was there with my sister. We were in her bedroom. And then I got this I began to meditate around 4 a.m. And I got this overwhelming desire to leave the room. And I picked up my sister and I said, we should just go in the other room. Immediately, when we left the room, NPR came on my mother's radio, full blast, her favorite station. And my brother looked at me and he goes, I've been here for 3 days. That radio has never gone on. Yeah. The television reset itself. All by itself. The television was not on at 4 a.m. And then later that morning, we were at my brother's property in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and my mother had a MediAlert pendant, a pendant which would alert, a central organization if she were to fall. The pendant went off. Wow. And my brother got a phone call, and they said, where is your mother? And they said, my mother's passed away. Where's the pendant? It's by her bedside, and the house is locked.
Wow.
So we looked at each other and thought to ourselves, there may be much more to this than meets the eye. That may just be the quantum realm, what we understand of it, at work, where nothing and no one ever dies. And if that's true, even again, if it's a coping mechanism, it does no harm. And if it's more than a coping mechanism, you know that you can always speak to your loved ones in your mind, which I do.
Yeah. And there was the experience. You had the experience. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story and for sharing your book with us. And it's all the time in the world, Lisa Broderick. So I encourage everyone to get the book. It's gonna change your life. And thank you so much for being here, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Laura, thank you for having me.